Welcome to Eminazhichiget, a podcast that celebrates Anishinaabe leaders from across the Great Lakes. Eminazhichiget translates as a person who does good things for others, and it's a program of the Michigan-based nonprofit Title Track. Miskopwaaganikwe Indigenous, Nimki Indodum, Inde Indao. I'm Holly T. Bird, co-executive director of Title Track and host of Eminazhichiget. And you actually answered a question I was going to ask you, which is, are you yourself a Christian? And you said that you're not. And is that a hard place to walk when you're there?
It depends which space I'm in. Usually with the diocese that I'm in here in the Upper Peninsula, it's not hard. It feels so good. It feels like when you go to your res and then it feels like coming home. Like as soon as you get there, you're like, oh my gosh, this just feels so good. I can relax. That's what it's like when I'm around these folks, because I know that they got me. They know me as like personally, and they know me professionally, and they understand what I'm about, and they understand how I want to partner and make things better for our wider community. So I would say in this diocese, no, it isn't hard. When I get out of Michigan, sometimes it can be hard, like even going a couple of reservations over, I'm wondering how it's going to go when we have to go over to Oneida, and because they had this little boarding school over there, and I'm not sure how folks are going to read it. I'm not sure if they're going to trust this random native, this random Ojibwe, that she says she's not Christian, but she's working with the church. So there's all those dynamics that can be hard. And going on to the executive council, sometimes that can be a little difficult because you're not sure how people are portraying you. Like all the folks I've been working with have been fantastic, but there's all that that unknown, so it's interesting.
Well, it's really new work too, isn't it? So it's, you're forging new pathways that haven't been forged before.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them on the Executive Council Committee and the General Convention resolution, they do not know that I'm not Christian, but the bishop, the presiding bishop, he's wonderful. And the president of the House of Deputies, they both know that I'm not, and they were the ones that appointed. So that makes me feel a little better,
I know this is an obvious question. I've had to in the past as a member of a anti-racism council. We had discussions with the local church that really wanted to come and help out somehow. And what we told them was, yes, come and help out. We would love for you to help out, but please don't use it as a way to get members. Don't come with the idea that you're going to do this to bring people into your church. And they were a little shocked that we said that, but we said, no, if you're going to be a true ally, you're coming out of the goodness of your heart because you believe in that mission, which is the mission to make things equitable or to help, not in a savior complex, but, to be there. And interestingly enough, they didn't show up.
Dang. Well, that's sweet.
Well, exactly. And so that's where I love to hear that there's something different happening with you. Is that this isn't an attempt by the church to bring in more members to heal, that rift, is it? Or is it simply just to be accountable?
Oh, accountability is huge. Yeah, we so I'll link it after, but the another project that goes good into this conversation right now is the traveling exhibit. And what that is we are recording boarding school survivors on a Michigan-based experience. So that can be an educational piece that travels about the state of Michigan. It's going to the tribes first, and it'll be by request. But in that, one of the big pieces is Bishop Rayford Ray has issued an official apology to the Native tribes of Michigan, the Native communities, not just federally recognized tribes, right? But Native people. And he wasn't able to do that until he really understood what he was going to be apologizing for. So he did tons of research. He listened to every one of the testimonials. I'm going to call them testimonials, not stories. He listened to all of those 3 times. It's just hurting. Because he comes from a German family that really understands racial justice. and understands how to take care of people. That's his story to tell. I shouldn't give too much into it, but he's a good heart. And getting back to it, the apology talks about self-determination of Native people, right? And when he talks about that, that tells me that he sees us and he sees our needs. He's not going into it to convert folks, but he's just doing it because that love that he has for his fellow man, for his fellow human. He wants folks to be okay, and that makes my heart happy. And so we had our very first opening in Juana Bay Indian community this past couple of weeks, and it was powerful. Beautiful house. We had a panel presentation that was just the actual survivors were able to come, and the diocese and the community over there. And so it was about 50 people or so. And the panel presentation was not all about the trauma, because in a lot of the boarding school pieces these days, presentations, they just want to hear about the grotesque, because America is so
Trauma
we're used to. Mhm, absolutely. And so this panel presentation, we really wanted to steer more towards progress, right? Where do you want to see this going? Who do you want to be on those stakeholders for accountability, things like that? And how do you help a healing journey of a survivor? So we kept it more along those lines, which was very helpful. It was really wonderful. But Rayford Ray, with his apology, he didn't read off his apology, but rather he had a statement on his apology. And he talked about his roles as a bishop, what that means, what that apology means, his roles and responsibilities as a white man in the Great Lakes, Anishinaabe territory, and as a community member. And so he's telling us all about what that means to him in the different roles. So I think that answers that question.
Wonderful.
The long-winded version.
And then within that, because often we look at those realizations and those apologies, that they are meaningful, and sometimes they're performative. So what is the end game for the archdiocese in this?
It's a good question. So right now we are in the era, I'm going to call it, of truth telling, right? The Diocese of Northern Michigan is in the era of truth telling. So we are highlighting those stories. We are helping to give voices for folks who did not have that voice before, and we're standing alongside them, right? Because that's what they should be doing. That's what they should have done decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
And from our research, we have found that there have been no Episcopal boarding schools, day schools, asylums, orphanages, etc., in the state of Michigan. There were one state over, but here in Michigan, they didn't have that. So folks are kind of confused. Why are you apologizing then? You didn't do it. Because they were complicit. They knew about it. They watched. They did nothing. Right? And they could have very possibly helped transport those children. All of these different ideas are going through. And so what the diocese, what their game plan is to continue with truth telling, but then also learning how to be an ally, not just an ally, but an accomplice, right? How do they help amplify pre-existing Native initiatives? Now, how do they save the Native people, but how do they amplify what we as Native people need to be doing? How do they amplify our, I guess, our self-determination? They see that, and they see that we have the right to live as ourselves. And even in his apology, he talks about how it was wrong for those boarding schools to exist, and how they should have recognized those people as already sacred beings.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine too, by example, the truth telling and standing by it's also showing those other parts of the archdiocese that may have been actually having the schools, or may have been more than complicit, or just standing by and watching, showing them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Archdiocese of Roman Catholic places there. It's very interesting how that's unfolding, and I don't work with Roman Catholic entities, but I'm in communication, right, with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, because it's very responsible and important for us to understand what's happening nationally and what's happening locally in different units, because there are so many different Native communities that have to deal with that conversation, that opening conversation with the churches that they were most impacted by, right? And so I want to understand from a very, very strategic level of what their game plan is. And then again, the systems, right? I'm very curious of their system. What is their plan for reconciliation research, you would call it, not reconciliation. What is their plan for truth telling? How are they doing tribal consultation? How are they letting tribal people at that table? And when they're not, then you got to challenge them in not aggressive ways, but in strategic ways. And you have to, unfortunately, sometimes you have to partner so that, excuse me, so that they can see better models of how folks are doing it and hopefully come along.
Wonderful. One other thing I wanted to touch on with this part of the conversation is, so we talked a little bit about how the saviorism complex was built into the Episcopal Church. You talked a little bit about the doctrine of discovery and how that impacted the formation of the U.S. And for those that don't know it, go ahead and explain what the doctrine of discovery is really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. The doctrine of discovery is a very old doctrine that had basically put land-owning white Christian men into the privilege of going into different territories, the Americas especially, and being able to claim that land. And Native people were just able to, we lived there, but we couldn't own it, right? And this doctrine of discovery, it like I mentioned before, it oozes out into all these different capacities of the infrastructure of our society today still. And even back, what was it, 2005 or 7, sometime very, very recently, the doctrine of discovery was cited in a court case against Oneida, and they were not able to have, they weren't able to win that case for a portion of land. And it's just wild that folks are so controlled by this still today and really unknowing of what that means, how it affects them, you know?
Right. I mean, it allowed them to actually enslave people that were not Christian. That very same, those papal bulls allowed, under the doctrine of discovery, that owning of land, the taking of land, and the genocides that occurred as a result of non-Christian people. So that included both our people as Indigenous people and Black people as slaves. So right, it blows my mind that it's still being used today in context. And this is where we talk about being accountable and truth telling and standing by and saying, okay, we're not going to let this happen anymore. This is where that systems change comes into place.
And that's where these different pieces that are happening, like the travel means of it, or like the apology, those are all, I call them task items, right? Those are literally task items that are backing up the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery for the Episcopal Church. So they were the first ones to do the repudiating of that. That was back in 2009. So how many years has it been until actual task items are happening? That took a minute, you know? So it's the accountability aspect is so vital to keep bringing up in all these different conversations. And I can sound like a squeaky wheel, and it's just fine, because I want folks that I'm working with and working alongside to feel confident in those conversations when they say, we are holding ourselves accountable in this space, in this space, in this space, right? And they understand it and it holds true. One thing I wanted to tell you about the Doctrine of Discovery, so for the listeners to look up, there's a fantastic organization I want to tell you about, since we're talking about the Doctrine of Discovery, is the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. And they work their butts off. Amazing, absolutely amazing. The co-founder and executive director, Sarah Augustine, serves on the Episcopal Executive Council or Committee. And her work that she does with this is incredible. She's helping folks to understand what systems change means to either their religious organizations or their nonprofits, et cetera. And she unpacks that and walks them through it. And a lot of the time they're religious entities, and she's Mennonite. And so it's wonderful to see Christian people understanding this to such a degree that they dedicate that much of their career to it, and they're having a huge effect.
You know what I love about that too is that when you see these people of faith, and they're doing this walk based on their faith, their outlook in the world and their sacred viewpoint of people, that gives me hope, because I know that our people have always viewed that, it just seems like that's finally coming together. Do you feel that?
Oh my gosh, yeah, so much. Like sometimes Rayford and I will be joking around. We'll see something that's just like so not kosher. And then I'll look at him and I'm like, oh, Jesus would be so mad. I'll say mad. It's a podcast. Jesus would be so mad at that. And he just laughs and he goes, Jesus would be mad at that, And so it's yeah, definitely.
That's pretty great. The one thing I wanted to ask you, and are you I'm assuming, or I'm not going to assume, but you're familiar with the prophecy of the eighth fire. And without going into too much detail here, because that is a very sacred story and sacred prophecy, where do you see yourself in that spiral? What part of that prophecy do you see being fulfilled through your work?
I think bringing folks together that wouldn't ever think they would be together, and bringing them together through love, having them getting them to realize that they have the same capacities of love. They just use different words for it, different stories, and getting that safety around all of our sacred teachings again, right? And it's happening. It really is. It's happening where we have all of these different spaces, these communities, towns, cities, if you will, that are safe now for our people. Like even past 1978, it wasn't safe for a few years, right? Nobody even knew that it had happened, that we had freedom of religion. Even my dad, he didn't know it for a couple of years. No.
We still have places where that's being fought. Even though the federal law was put in place, it doesn't always mean that it's still safe, because we know that people the law is there to enforce that right and to safeguard it. So people are still having to work to enforce it. So I always said, people don't believe me when I say, I wasn't allowed to really practice my religion because the law was put into place, but it didn't take practical effect for like 10 years. And I said, my people weren't allowed to practice until I was like in high school. It's so hard to believe, but now that we can joyfully say, as Indigenous people here in Michigan, in Anishinaabeg territory, who we're always talking about the eighth fire, we're always talking about that prophecy where we have choices to make. And we have places to step so that we can prevent the destruction of our world or our people. And that the eighth fire is supposed to be where we either come together or we don't, right? And so you're saying you view yourself as helping to be that one of those love binders to helping people come together. And I think that's wonderful. And it is wild to examine, where we are in that sometimes, to really think about our purpose and where we're from, and going into that, what inspired you to do the work that you do?
My kids. Totally my kids, my grandma, my dad, my family in general. Because I'm mixed, right? Half Anishinaabe and half Finnish, Sami on my side. And my kids, they're in spaces, folks will think they're Native, but they're not, they're racially ambiguous, we call it. And so they're going to have, when they're out of our region, because everybody knows who they are in our region, but when they're away from our community, they're not going to have the same experience, that same safe experience of being Native here. And I want our world to be better for them. I don't want them to hurt like my dad hurt. You know, I don't want them to hurt like my grandma or be scared, or, you know, I want them to live safely and proudly as Indigenous people. And I want them to understand what that means and all the things that we've had to go through collectively. Because we can't even put into words, right? Family and the elders that have been working, I want them to be okay.
I always say that I'm not going to cry during these things, but I always do. Compose. I do. Every time I interview somebody, there's something that comes out that's just so heartfelt and compelling. And it makes me so grateful to do this work and to be Indigenous and to love my people so much. So thank you for sharing that. And I don't know if you noticed, but as you were talking about that, a little thumb came onto your screen,
I
like,
saw that.
and
Look at
you
that.
were touching the screen, were you?
I was not touching. Here's my keys over here.
And I wasn't touching.
I thought it was you.
No, no, because that was on your screen. It came from your end. I know. I'm like, oh, this is wild. This is
Okay.
like the ancestors are giving you the thumbs up, girly.
Oh.
You know, I've always said that, or I was taught by some beautiful elders that, you know, we are our ancestors' hopes and prayers. You know, we are somebody else's seventh generation.
Mhm.
And their hopes and prayers for what we could and would be. And so when I see you doing this work and I see you getting the thumbs up from the spirits, I'm like, yep, there you are, you know, like somebody's really proud of you. And aside from me, you know. So thank you so much. And you know, I do want to I want to say thank you to Leora. One thing that people don't know is that Leora has also helped us out with some song workshops, water protector training camp. She comes and helps to bring the Indigenous voice. She comes to help to bring that gentle spirit of heart, and shares her kids with us, whom, you know, we love. And just really, whether it's cooking or water work or language or religion, you know, she's here with her full heart. So I'm so happy to recognize you as for our Eminazhichiget series as one of our people doing good things in our community. And I'm so proud and honored to work with you here at Title Track as well. So miigwech for all you do, and can't wait to see what you do next.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.